Guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Ayomide. If this is your first time here, you are absolutely welcome. On this channel, you're going to find DIY sewing tutorials and pattern drafting tutorials. In this tutorial, I shared how I made this Ankara blouse with multiple keyholes and a back waistline. If you have been wondering how to make this, then this video is for you and you should see this tutorial up until the very end. I also shared how you can also make this puffy sleeve too. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please kindly subscribe to the channel, join the community, support what I do on this platform. And without talking too much, guys, let us get started. These are the materials that I am going to be working with. I have the main fabric, it's an Ankara fabric that I'm going to be using. I have my lining, I have my fabric scissors and also my masking tape. I've gone ahead to draft out my full scale bodice. I have my front on this part and I have the back on this side. For the neck width, I went for a neck width of about 3.5 inches. This is optional, you can decide to use what you want, and my neck depth was 4.5 inches for the front. Now I've also gone ahead to carry out my bodice contouring along the underbust, and I used about 2 inches for my bodice contouring along the underbust too. I have a detailed tutorial on my YouTube channel on how you can draft a princess dart. You can check it up just in case you don't know how to go about it. For my back also, I used the same neck width as I used for the front, 3.5 inches, and the neck depth for the back too is about 3.5 inches also. Now let us start with the front. The very first thing we'll do is that we are going to be closing the bust dart. And if you have been watching my tutorials, you will know that for you to close a dart, you have to slash through another dart to make your closing very easy to do. So I slashed through the waist dart, the entire waist dart along the underbust, and then I closed the bust dart. I'm also going over to redraw my side line. Okay, you would also need to do this likewise, and you would also need to redraw your armhole too, because of the dart that we have along the armhole. Like I said, I have a detailed tutorial on my YouTube channel whereby you can watch this. I would put a link in the description box. So the part I am crossing out is where I am going to be trimming off entirely. So what I'll do next is I would just go over and then trim off my front pattern. Guys, this should be your pattern set for the front. After you must have taken out your dart, it should look something similar to this. So now let us move over to the back. For your back, you could have a dart coming from the armhole, or you could have another one coming from the shoulder slant. But for me, I'm going to be going for the one coming from the shoulder slant, and I'm going to be redrawing it because I want it to be a little bit slanted. So I'm going to be getting the midpoint of the entire measurement I have on the shoulder slant. Once I've gotten the midpoint, I will then connect it to where my dart is starting from. So doing it this way is going to give me a more slanted line, and I just find it quite finer doing it this way. So that part that I'm crossing, I don't need it. This is what I'm going to be working with. I've gone ahead to do my 1-inch back tightening along the back because I don't want my zip to bulge. Once I'm through with all of this, I can now cut out my dart and then split my back pattern into two along the shoulder. Because I want a back waistline effect on my blouse, I'm going to be taping both my center front and my side front together, just making sure that the waistline match appropriately. So I'm grabbing a tiny piece of masking tape and then I'm just matching them up together, more like I'm bringing them together. Then from my waistline, I'm going to be marking 4.5 inches downward. You could go higher, you could go lower. I'm going to be grabbing my pattern master now, and then I'm going to be creating a curve that is going to taper down towards the center front. So this is going to bring about the back waistline. So the lower you mark, the higher the curve is going to be. If you mark 6 inches, you may not really get a well-defined curve, but if you mark 2, 3, 4 inches, you can get a well-defined curve. I'm also going to be repeating the same thing for the back also. Bring my center back and my side back together, make sure the waistline matches appropriately. And then from the waistline, I'm going to be marking the same 4.5 inches I marked on the front, and then I'm also going to be connecting it to my center back. But for the center back, I didn't really take it all the way down. Rather, for the back, I didn't really take it all the way down to the center back. I just stopped where the dart started from. Can you see? So I just stopped somewhere around that place because I don't want it to be sharp along the back. Once I finish marking, I'm going ahead to trim off the parts that I no longer need. So guys, this is going to be my working pattern. I have my center back, side front, and my center front. These are all the pattern set that I'm going to be working with. Now let us move over to cutting the fabric. I've gone ahead to cut my lining, so I just place my lining on my fabric and I'm cutting. When you're cutting, make sure you add the necessary seam allowances. You need half an inch on each panel to join both the panels together. That is to join the center front and the side front together. I also added my side seam allowance. I used 1.5 inch for the side seam. Now for the sleeve, because the sleeve is going to be pleated along the armhole and I'm also going to be fixing an elastic, I drafted a quite bogus basic sleeve. So my actual chest line is 7.5, but I increased it to about, I think 12 inch or 13 inches. I also marked that same measurement along the hem, and then I just created my armhole curve. So it is a basic sleeve, but I extended the chest line just to have more fabric that I could pleat and also have more fabric that I could put in an elastic along the hem. I'm also folding my fabric on fold too so that I can get another sleeve too, because I need two sleeves. So this is my center back, my side back, all necessary seam allowances added already. I have my side front and I equally have my center front. Before I begin joining all of the panel pieces together, I'm going to be ironing, interfacing on the main fabric for the front, but I won't iron on the back. If you wish, you could iron on the back. I'm also going to be ironing on the lining likewise too. Ironing interfacing gives more structure to your fabric. So that is what I'll go ahead and do. And once I'm done, we can now begin joining all of the fabric pieces together. These are the fabric pieces that I will be working with. I have my center front right here, the main fabric, the lining. I also iron in interfacing on the both of them, both the fabric and the lining. I also have my side front here, my main fabric, and my lining also. I also iron in interfacing on the both, on all of them too. I have my center back right here, lining and fabric. I didn't use interfacing, but if you want, you can use interfacing on it. I don't want it to be too heavy. I also have my side back here also, fabric and lining, and we have a sleeve too. So what I'll do next is I'm going to be joining all the pieces together. And how will I do that? I'm going to be taking my center front and side front, the part that matches it accordingly. I'll pin it down by my half an inch seam allowance and sew it all the way up on this side, and also do likewise for this other side too. So I'm going to be sewing the fabric separately. I will also sew the lining separately. So you're going to be sewing it separately like this also. I would also do the same thing for the back too. So I'm going to be joining the center back and the side back for the fabric, center back and the side back for the lining separately. So that is what I'll go ahead and do. I'm done sewing all the panel pieces together. So this is one part of the back. Let me just take it one at a time. This is the lining, one part of the back and another part of the back. So once you are done, you would want to give this a really good press. Open your seam lines and press it open. It makes your work appear very, very neat. So this is the back, the lining. I also have the main fabric, the fashion fabric for the back likewise too. The same process, the same procedure. I also flat iron the seam lines too. I will equally have my front here also. You can see this is the front, and then I ironed in some interfacing along the bust area just to give it some structure. So this is it on the right side, and my main fabric for the front also. The front for the main fabric, the bust area is really pronounced. Can you see? Can you see how pronounced it is? And this is it on the inside. I also ironed interfacing along the bust area. So I did not even use wadding for this, and you can see how pronounced it is without wadding. Can you see? Without wadding. So the next thing to do now is that I'm going to be carrying one piece like this, and then I'll place right sides against each other, right sides against each other like this. Then I'll go ahead and sew it along the neckline by 1/4 inch, sew it along the zipper, sew it along this side and along this side. I'll leave the armhole and the shoulder slant. I'll do this for both the front and also for the back. I'm done turning each of the fabric pieces with the lining. This is the front, so I went ahead to sew it in by 1/2 inch along the neckline, 1/4 inch along the sides, 1/2 inch along the hem. And this is what I have for the front. I equally did likewise for the back too. I sew 1/2 inch along the neckline, 1/4 inch along the zipper allowance, 1/2 inch along the hem, and 1/4 inch along the side. I repeated the same process for the other side of the back too. The next thing I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be fixing my zipper along the center back. So for this, you would want to use a matching zip, and you could also opt for an open-ended zip. So I'm using an open-ended zip, and this makes wearing the blouse easier. Now, before we join the front and the back together, we would need to create our keyholes. And in order for you to create your keyholes well, you would need something that you would need to use to draw your circle. And I'm going to be using this balm to draw my circle because I'm going to be okay with the shape and the size of the circle once I'm done. And for this blouse, we are going to be having 5 keyholes. One of the keyholes would be centrally placed, while the other ones would be placed at an equal distance. Now, in order to be able to achieve this properly, I'm going to be getting the center front roughly, and I'll come down by 1.5 inch along the center front. I'll then grab my balm and then use a fabric marker to draw in my circle. But let me just put this here that if you are not really sure of the location, make sure you use a pencil first before you reinforce it with a marker, or you could even use a pencil from the beginning up until the very end. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be tracing the shape of the circle. Once I'm okay with that, I would move over to the next circle. So for the next circle, I'm also marking about 1.5 inch away from the previous circle, and I'm also using my fabric marker to trace off the shape of the circle. So this makes your work very easy to do, and it also guarantees that you're going to be having the same size, the same shape of circle once you are done. So guys, looking at the keyholes on this part of the blouse, I realized that they were not well aligned in line with what I have with the other side. So I'm using my pencil now to redraw. So this was why I said earlier that you could start with a pencil from the beginning to the end so that you don't ruin your fabric with a marker pen. So I'm just going over to redraw the keyhole so that what I have on the left can be roughly equal to what I have on the right. So bringing the blouse closer to the camera, this is what it's going to look like. What you will do next is that you go over and then top stitch this circle all the way down. Yes, you're going to be top stitching both the fabric and the lining together so that your fabric and lining can be a single piece, and this makes making the keyhole blouse very easy. So I'll just go over to my sewing machine and then sew down that circle. I'll sew it all the way down. I asked us to stitch it round so that you can have both your fabric and your lining as a single piece. It makes it easier. Now I've gone ahead to create 2 keyholes already, and I used a bias tape to finish off the raw edges, and this is what it looks like on the inside. So what I'm going to do next is that I'm going to be cutting this out open. So because we've already stitched around, you don't have to deal with lining separately and deal with fabric separately. You know, you're just dealing with your fabric as a single piece. So I'm going to be cutting this out now and then use my bias tape to finish off the raw edges. I'm done cutting it out, but you won't cut through your seam, okay? So you're going to be cutting it this way, and I'm going to be using my bias tape to finish off the raw edges because we cannot leave our blouse this way. So what you will do is that you will need to turn your blouse to the wrong side, grab open your bias tape, close off one end in order to secure the rough edge of your bias too. Place it on one part of the blouse, one part of the keyhole this way, and then we are going to be sewing it all the way down. You can pin it just to make it easier for you to sew. So I'm on my sewing machine now, and then I'm just going over to sew this down. Trust me, this is not as easy as it seems. You might need to use your hand wheel to make it very easy, because if you use your pedal, you can just go out of line or out of what you're supposed to sew. This is what you should have once you're done. So the next thing I'll do is that you need to turn this over to the right side. So you can use your hand to turn it over to the right side. Then place your bias tape on your fabric this way and secure the other end of your tape with a pin. I'm done using my pin to secure it. So what I'll go to and do next is I'm going to be top stitching it all around. This is how I'm going to be doing the remaining ones. This was how I did the first two. So I have just two left, and then I will be done with the keyhole for this blouse. I'm done fixing all of the keyholes. Trust me, this wasn't a very easy thing to do. Make sure you eat well before you do this. Make sure you eat very, very well. But I love this process because even on the inside, your work looks very neat on the inside. That's why I love this process. So this is what my blouse looks like. Now let us proceed to the next thing. What I'll do next is I'm going to be placing both front and back pieces together, and then I'm going to be matching them along the shoulder so that I can sew it down. So I'm grabbing fabric to fabric and lining to lining, and I'm securing it down with a tape, with a pin rather, and I'll go ahead and sew it down by my 1/2 inch seam allowance. So you need to be careful with the front because of the keyhole that we have there. I'm done joining the both shoulders together. This is the outcome of what I just did, and on the inside this is what I have. You would also want to trim off any excess seam in order to avoid any bulkiness along the shoulder. The next thing now would be to join it together along the side. So I will just go over and then measure and sew down the remaining allowance along the side. That is what I'll go ahead and do. I'm done joining it down along the side, guys, and this is what I have. Don't worry, once I hang this on my mannequin, you would see I left some inches along the armhole in order to make fixing the sleeve very, very easy. Now for the sleeve, this is the sleeve I'm working with, the bulky basic sleeve as I called it earlier. The first thing you will need to do with this sleeve is that you will need to create your elastic casing along the hem, and to do that I would fold in 1/2 inch and then fold in about 1 inch. So this should be okay to accommodate your elastic. I'm going to be doing this for the both sleeves. I'm done creating my elastic casing, and I need to pass my elastic through, and I'm going to be using this about, it's not up to 1/2 inch, but it's a little bit more like 1/4 inch elastic. What I'll do first of all is I'm going to be securing one end of the elastic with a safety pin. This is what would help me pass the elastic through the elastic casing. So pinning it down, I'm going to be passing my safety pin through the elastic casing, and then I will run my elastic through the entire hem of the sleeve. Once I'm done, I'm going to be securing one end of the elastic. I'll just go over and sew it down. I would also pull the elastic to my desired round sleeve measurements, plus about 1 inch seam allowance that I will use to join it together, and then also secure the other end of my elastic too. So I've secured one end before, and I'm also securing the other end. The next thing I'll do is I'm going to be placing right sides of my sleeve together, and then I'm going to be sewing it down by 1 inch. But I'm not going to be sewing it all the way down. I'll stop about 4 inch before I get to the end. This is the sleeve, guys. I'm done sewing, and I left about 3 to 4 inches, and I'm going to be sewing this to my blouse. So I've grabbed my sleeve and I'm placing the midpoint of my sleeve to my shoulder slant. I'll pin it down. I would also grab one end of my sleeve to one end of my blouse. That's the part that matches appropriately. I would also pin it down. I would also grab the other end of my sleeve to the other end of my blouse, and I would equally pin it down. You would realize that there's an excess of the sleeve, so this is what I am going to be pleating along the armhole. I'll sew a little bit, and once I get to the top part of my shoulder, I'm going to be creating tiny little pleats along the armhole. I'm done sewing this particular sleeve down, and this is what it looks like. So this is the space that we have left, and we would need to close up the space. So what I'll do is I will make sure the front and the back armhole matches up together, pin it down just to put them in place, and then I'll go ahead and continue my seam from the sleeve all the way down to the side. And this is what I have, guys. This is my sleeve on one end. I will repeat the same thing for this other end of my sleeve. Guys, here is the finished work. The both sleeves are already fixed, and we have our keyhole blouse here with the back's waistline detail. If you found this tutorial helpful, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please do so. Subscribe to the channel, join the community. If you have any questions, you can ask them in the comment section. I would be willing to answer your questions. If you have suggestions, you can also put in your suggestions on how to make this channel grow. So guys, until my next video, make sure you have a wonderful day. Goodbye.